Hello, everybody, and welcome to Enrich TV, a place to learn practical tools to have a love-rich life. And today I would like to welcome Rhea Lala to our show. Welcome, Rhea.
Hello, Darya. Thanks so much for having me.
It's wonderful to have you. And let me tell our viewers and readers about you before you share your story. Because I know you from a friend perspective. We got connected through another friend, and
Yes.
I'm a big fan of yours. I mean, you're gorgeous. You do amazing work in the world. You do some projects that I feel so inspired by, and that's why I wanted you to share with more people how we can enrich our life from a perspective of parenthood, and also bring some of the insights and nuggets from your work. And maybe you can tell us also from the beginning how you got into parenting, and some of the insights that we can implement in our everyday life, because most of us are parents, or
Yes.
if we are not, then we have parents, and learning these practical tips is so important. And you have done this for the last years, but before that you were also in training, so this is kind of bread and butter of what you've been doing for the more than a decade. 15 years.
Yeah, almost 20 years.
Oh my
Actually.
goodness. And you obviously, a speaker, because we're gonna meet each other at A-Fest soon in Ibiza.
Excited.
Exciting. And you are a parental coach for parents.
Yes.
And I love how you put it. You help parents create dreamy connections with their children.
Mm.
And that is so beautiful and so much needed in this world, right? So without sharing too much, because I know it's so much better if you tell us about what you do and who you are. Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much. So I have been in the field of EQ or emotional intelligence for many, many years, but working with companies and figuring out how to optimize situations and how to create really great rapport. And then so I did that for a while. And then I had this amazing opportunity. Neither my husband and I are builders, but we decided that we're both really into sustainable development. And we went down to the Caribbean and we built the first shipping container apartment building that's been built in the Caribbean, which was an amazing and exhausting and incredible experience. I mean, we fought, we argued, we bled. But what was really great about it is it really changed the mind, I think, in the Caribbean, where, I mean, if you can imagine shipping containers as it was being built, packed up, like 45 of them together, it really scared the Trinidadians, at least. And it wasn't finished. And so we had like huge delegations from the government and from the university coming over and wanting to know. We were all over the front page of the newspapers. And so we were really pushing the edges of what had ever been done before in terms of what is beautiful and what can be done reusing materials. Anyways, I'm not going to go into a big thing about shipping container building, but I'm a big advocate. Now, if you see it, it doesn't look like shipping containers at all. It's been covered by stucco. It took us about a year and a half to build. But from that, what was really cool is the United Nations reached out to us and they wanted us to build. So many people had reached out to us to build container homes because it's incredibly safe. It's earthquake resistant, it's fire resistant, it's mold resistant. So we did that for a while, and then we really wanted to be back into the first world, which we did, and that really opened up what did I want to do. And I found that it was a really easy movement into parenting because I was already reading lots of parenting books. I was already going to seminars, and then I just had a deep interest in how would EQ, how we use it every day as a parent in our interactions with our children, all the subtle, minuscule one-on-one conversations, and kind of bring that together. A business emerged, and that's what I do now. So yeah, creating dreamy connections between parents and their kids. I mean, we can call it whatever we want, but at the heart of it, as parents, what we want is that our kids are growing up, expressed, thriving, but we want to know that the connection between us and them is something that's magical and close and unified. And, using certain presence of mind and consciousness, we can create those, beautiful moments and really have that continue well into their adulthood.
Wow, that's beautiful. So EQ, for those who are listening, is the emotional intelligence
Yes.
And that's what you had been teaching in corporations, and now you're integrating into this world of children and parents, and how that communication flows or doesn't, and how to make it flow.
That's right. Yep.
That's so interesting. So if we were to dive in straight to, because there's so much to talk about. So I know that you've prepared some tips for us to share how that communication should be, and what as parents we should do or shouldn't do to make sure that our children are happy, independent, and resilient, right?
Yeah.
Emotionally resilient to what's going on in the world that's high paced, demands everywhere, and virtual. Huh?
Yeah. So we can just dive into that right now if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that comes up time and time again when I'm speaking to parents is that, how do I get my kids to listen to me? Yeah. And it's a real frustration if the children they feel aren't following what the parent's will is. So if we just look at listening, kids, there's a natural hierarchy that exists between parent and child, and the children, and this is going to be hard for some listeners to believe, but all children want to be in alignment with the parent. They want that natural hierarchy that exists. Yeah. I think sometimes parents feel, well, I don't see that exhibiting. In fact, if it's anything, they're much more peer-oriented, right? So just like a compass that always wants to fall face north, or just like a duckling that if the mother duckling isn't there, will follow anything it can perceive its needs are going to best be met by. So a little duckling will follow a goat if you give it a chance, because if it provides warmth and food and companionship and togetherness, then it's going to get its needs met. So now the question becomes, how do we create a relationship such that the child feels that whatever their perceived needs are, the parents, mother or father, are going to be there to offer that to them. And in lieu, if that does not exist, if that dynamic does not exist, don't worry, because you can recapture that, and I can share some ideas on how. But if it doesn't exist, then you have a child who now no longer is sitting in that natural hierarchy and is going to move towards a child. And that's how you get a child that's very parent-oriented. So children that are generally 12 and under, this is this magical window of opportunity to really set the foundation by which a parent can create those connections.
How interesting. So what you're saying is that we need to remember that this hierarchy is healthy.
Yes, and normal.
And normal. And it's a lot of the time as parents, we try to, well, connect with our children on their level. And it sometimes can be confused as peer relationship, or even almost they become the boss and they demand things, and we as parents sort of please them or try to help them, but from a different dynamic, sort of the hierarchy gets reversed.
Right. But just to be really careful with when I say hierarchy, often we can think of I'm the boss and it's top-down parenting. And that's not what I'm talking about. When parents say to me, how do I get my kids to listen? The first thing I know is, well, what we need to figure out is how to build the rapport. And rapport isn't built from top-down parenting. Rapport is where we are connecting and attuning and listening and have wide-eyed, curious observer, curious detective hat where we're asking questions and really trying to understand the emotional labyrinth that is existing within your child's mind.
So how do we do that?
Yeah. Well, so in order to do that, there's a number of things that come together. I think that one of the most important bits to it is how the parent finds their own ways of calming their nervous system down. Yeah. So what we're really talking about is emotional regulation. It's very, very important, I think, for the parent to have that first. We've that saying that the timeout really is for the parent, the time in is for the kid, right? So the timeout's for the parent so that they can regroup and do whatever it takes so that when they speak, they're not have an amygdala response or an emotional response, that they're using their their prefrontal cortex, and they're really reasoning out and being really deliberate about what they're trying to create in this interaction. So in order to do that, a parent needs to find their way. So my first tip is to figure out what is that way for you. Now, many of us are doing meditation and doing yoga, which is, I think, a fantastic way. It's my go-to. So there are times when I'm with my children and I'm feeling myself getting triggered, and I'll just say, hey guys, mommy just needs to take a time out. I just need to breathe properly. And so sometimes we'll do it together. Sometimes if I feel I'm really triggered, I'll go into the room and I'll sit there and I'll do my deep diaphragmatic breaths. So I'll do that a few times. Now, I will tell you that there are times that I've done that and I'm so triggered that I can't find my breath. And I can feel that it's just like right here. It's a very shallow kind of fake breathing that's happening. So I also recognize that this happened from one time I was in the car with my husband, and we love going on road trips. And I love starting the road trip with us holding hands, but something got me angry, and all of a sudden I felt like I don't want to hold his hand. And so I'm going to my breath, but I can't find it. So I just turn the radio on. And then, anything that gets you in your body. It could be music, it could be dance. But listening to the music, it was the right song at the right moment. And all of a sudden I could find it. I could feel my chest expand, and then my hand reached over and we could start our trip holding hands. So find what it is for you. Generally, the breath is the fastest way to calm your nervous system. So in that place, once you do feel that you are together, and here's how you know. Like, you have to know what your tells are. Like, for me, I know that I hold a lot of tension in my chest. So because I've spent a lot of time reading my body, and this is the difference, because a lot of people, when they get into a frustrated state, it's a very cognitive process. It's the he said, she said, coulda, woulda, shoulda, and they're just in a loop, and they're playing the loop over and over again, right? So different from, as you know, emotions are somatic. They're a physiological thing. If I was a doctor and I said I was angry, he can't crack open my head and go, oh, there's anger. I mean, we could have called it blah, but we called it anger. So anger is a physiology. It's my blood pressure. It's my cortisol. It's my adrenaline. It's my heart rate. All of these things. So we really have to go into the body and be able to calm it there so that we can think in a calm, intentional way with our kids.
Wow. That's so important. So the first tip is really to find that routine, in a way, for a parent to calm down themselves first.
Yeah.
And it can be breathing, it can be dancing, it can be somatic movement. For you it was that getting back to the ability to hold hands.
Yes.
And whatever you needed to do to calm yourself down, to hold the hand so you can start this journey.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's easier when you have a calm partner who is ready to hold hands with you. A lot of our listeners are single moms or couples who are ready to or looking forward to having a child. And, we all have our low moments, and I think that's when we need help most of all to get to that space of calmness. And I actually had this morning when one of the youngest child was crying, and I knew that it was a cry for attention, but I had a low moment and I couldn't give that attention to him. And instead of giving attention and empathy, I got angry myself. So
yes.
What would a person need to do? Because breathing is great, but if it doesn't work, and as you say, if you have that chest kind of tension, or some people, I have it in my shoulders, some people have it in their throat, some people have headaches, or they just want to rush out or say something angry or do something that is kind of the outlet of that frustration. What would be the rescue?
So this is where I really advocate doing a body exploration. So the minute I notice that I have a tone, and by the way, my kids are at the age where they'll go, oh, you've got a tone, you're supposed to be the conscious parent, or the minute I realize, there's a moment that I realize that I am being kind of beastly right now, right? Like I have a tone and I feel angry. The minute that kicks in, I name the emotion, first of all. I go, oh, I'm feeling really angry. And I make that very present because I like to use a lot of emotional language around the kids. Oh, I can feel really frustrated. Oh, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. Like go further than mad, sad, or happy. Those are good, but let's face it. If we're feeding our kids who are two a grapefruit, we're not going to say it's a plum because it's a shorter word, right? So use the emotional language, share your stories, even stories that have happened to you during your day when your kids come home. So that's one. I'll name it for myself. The other thing I'll do is I will take a time out if I need to. So in that moment, I can't help my kid if I'm spiraling. Yeah. And we already know that emotions are contagious. We already know mirror neurons and resonant circuitry has the child picking up on the parent's energy. So me trying to fake my way through a contorted Joker smile to connect with the child is going to be lost. It's better I remove myself and do what I need to do. Now, you mentioned that you have single moms and they may not have a supportive partner. Okay, so that's okay. First of all, it's important, I think, to demystify this idea of regulation. If I can't regulate, there's something wrong with me. Okay? Kids aren't born with regulatory circuitry. This needs to be co-built with a parent. So this idea of self-regulation, which I've begun, I normally say emotional regulation, but this idea of self-regulation as being this pinnacle to attain. If you're self-regulated, then that means that you've got it all together. So really what we've been designed to from the time we were children is to co-regulate. And so when our children are in distress, the idea is, I'm going to walk you through how we co-regulate with them. But for us, the co-regulation might be where we take our little time out, if we can, and we might think about, friends that are supportive, or people in our life that believe in us, or something that allows us to sink into that energy of others that love and appreciate us, so that we can build ourselves back up. So we can at least get to the point where we can find our breath. Yeah. The other thing I advocate is I do a body scan. So I imagine from the tippy top of my head, I'm just scanning, and all I'm feeling for is any sort of sensation in my body. Now, I've done this enough times to figure out that it's in my chest that I generally hold, any tension. So now I really go to my chest and I do it kind of upstream. I'm like, oh, it feels like somebody's stepping on my chest. What's worrying me? So many of us, as you know, didn't grow up in environments with our own parents where they talked about feelings and emotions and allowed for a lot of self-expression, let's say. So now we're trying to really build this muscle as adults. So that's okay. We're all in this together. So this just means that the more each of us, and this is always going to be my work in progress, the more we are able to just go into our bodies and try and find those places where we're feeling sensation. And then I get really granular: color, texture, movement, intensity, shape, and I describe it. And in the staying with the description of it, I'm no longer in my head. I'm in my body, and it begins to morph and change. And from then, if there's ever any epiphany, any jewel, any gem that comes from my unconscious wanting to reveal itself, it's going to be in that place. So that is something that takes time to build. And I haven't built it. I'm not at any pinnacle. It's just that's what is forever going to be my work in progress, is how much I can attune to my own body. And one other thing is that I think has gone straight out of my head. Okay, I lost that one.
Well, hopefully it will come back, because there's so much wisdom you're sharing, and this body scan is a practical, quick way to move away from the head, from that reactive mode, that amygdala hijack, they call it.
Exactly.
Back to the body. And some people say, well, breathe in. How do I breathe? Do I become kind of go away and find a place where no one disturbs me and just do that meditative breathing, which I can't, and then I blame myself for not being able to breathe, and that becomes even worse. But what you're saying is that you start scanning your body from top down and notice where the tension is. And
pressure, tightness, anything.
Get ready. And then whatever comes up, from the unconscious mind, because that's the body's somatic wisdom, then it helps soothe and release that tension, cognitive tension, and then you already shift it. By that time, you can actually go back and have a conversation.
And by the way, if ever our unconscious is ever going to reveal something much deeper from what place this is coming from, which is really where we get to understand our inner mind and why we say and react and do the things we do with our kids, then that's the place you're going to get access to it. So if you stay there long enough with the sensation, then it will emerge as a jewel. And you can go, oh, you know? And again, if you can't move away from your children to take the time out, because let's face it, if we're at a grocery store or in the car, there's nowhere to run, right? In which case, you know, build accountability partners. Say, hey, I can feel myself getting angry right now, so I'm going to go to my breath. Can you guys help me breathe? And kids love to play the role of teacher.
I love it.
So they can now say, okay. In fact, they tell me when I need to breathe. Mommy, you need to go to your breath. So it's great.
That's a fantastic tool to make them also accountable, to help you feel accountable and have that partnership. Whereas, okay, you know, we are in a situation here, you know, I need to breathe. So it's not something is wrong with you, calm down, it's all fine, gotta focus on the child, but actually, hey, I'm gonna regulate it myself, and with that, you can just sense it and naturally it will regulate.
And I really want to share this as well, because if we're talking about co-regulation, how do we do it now with our children when things are breaking down and a meltdown's occurring? And so now this was always the mindset behind a very archaic way of parenting, I feel, which is to send the child into a timeout. Yeah. You go someplace else and you calm down, which we've seen, there have been studies that have been done with monkeys. If you take a monkey and you separate them from the group, that is a form of, like, they go insane. And so now, but as parents, we see that the child now has come back and they're calm. They're no longer crying and they want to interact and reconnect. But that is because the tears have been spent, but there's a damage that is occurring to that child in that stressful state. And imagine it's as if the child is in a dark forest with howling monkeys and they don't know how to get out. And so now, no matter what transpired, if we can visualize that they're in a forest with howling monkeys, would we leave them there? And the answer is no. We'd grab their hand and we'd say, don't worry, you and I, we're going to get out together. We're going to find a way out. So it's that mindset that when the child now is having a meltdown, our job is, so I actually want to give you an actual situation that happened with my son. My son had to do a really big presentation in front of a whole group of people, and he was feeling really nervous. And he says to me, help me, like, I'm feeling really nervous about this. And you could see that he was just wringing himself. Now, I wanted to go into, you know, Anthony Robbins, motivational speaker, and start talking about, you know, epic tales of you can do it and how to conquer fear. But in that moment, I'm going into a very left brain response, and he's in his own little amygdala hijack. So instead of me wanting to fix it, what I realize is what I have to do is I have to co-regulate. Now, if I'm trying to co-regulate by trying to put all my loving intention on him, that's not really co-regulating, yeah? My energy is still, I've got to fix you. I've got to channel my energy towards you. So I lay down on the bed with him, and all I did was I asked him to count from 10 to 1 backwards. And with each one, slowly as he counts, we're going to do a deep breath. But my focus ceased to be on him. My focus was just on me. How do I create the energy field around me so that our resonance circuitry that's happening between us, how do we, when he leans into that, it feels calm, and he derives calm, and he's creating his own calm. So we count to 10. And with each one, my focus is only on myself. Yeah, my body, my sensation, my breath. At the end of it, it's almost like I'm oblivious to him now because I'm just in my moment. And he turns to me and he says, oh, that feels so good. So this is the idea behind co-regulation, which is you're not trying to put your intention on them, which now is a stress in your mind to try and help. This is how do I calm me such that what I'm creating, this field around me, is they're feeding, it's feeding into them, and they're also working on their own regulation as well. But we are co-regulating. That's kind of visual.
That's brilliant. Now I have a challenge for you. Let me
Yeah.
share with you my example, and maybe you can also correct us. Propose some different ways to deal with that. So the little one is 3, and
3. Yeah.
yeah, so he sometimes has a very, especially when he's sick, and I understand, when he wakes up and he's hungry, he just wants his own way, and I'm also, for example, tired, and I would like everything to go nicely, and then he goes into the moany stage and like asking for something like bread that's not the same bread that he wants, and he wants this, and I'm not available, and he that's the build up, and I'm already realizing, hey, something is going on here. So I try different ways to interact, and sometimes that definitely doesn't work is to mimic. I thought maybe it's a great idea, just mimic his state, and he goes like, I don't want this bread, and I'll go, which bread would you like? And then sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and then he really feels like I'm kind of laughing at him, and that's when he feels lower, and then he goes into crying, and that's when I feel bad, and I'm like, oh, what am I supposed to do now? And then I try to be with him and breathe with him, and he's like, no, nothing is working. So I move away to give him space, or to have my own space, and then he comes after me and he's like crying and crying. And then I think this crying piece that is also when I'm low or when I'm sick, that's what gets into me. So what should I do as an example?
Okay, so the first one is, I love that you said you try and use a bit of humor, because humor can be a really great pattern interrupt, but as you say, sometimes it can work and sometimes they can't, right? So it's always good to try things, because sometimes you can take them down a different path and you get into a giggle fest. So let's suppose you just woke up from sleep, right? I know that kids generally, when they wake up from sleep, it's a really, I call it like a really romantic period. And I have this thing about whenever we've ever been apart for any length of time, be it school or sleep, that there has to be something called these epic, I call it epic hellos and goodbyes. Yeah. So I do that because I want him in that distance of sleep that we've now reconnected and reestablished the relationship. Now, my kids, I mean, they're spoiled when it comes to, they want back massage and touches and tickles and scratches and head rubs and the whole nine. I mean, it's a whole Swedish massage that's happening before they even open their eyes. Who has time for that? But I do that in whatever amount of time I can so that they feel that love and connection. I do it even when I pick up the kids. So I sometimes have to do something here in my head before I receive the kids, because I'm not always in that wumpy. I've just been working on my things, and now it's been punctured with I have to pick up kids. And so I want to make sure that I'm grounded and centered. So that's one. One thing that I tend to use is the idea of, Dan Siegel talks about this, but it's the lead with the right brain, redirect with the left. So when we want a right brain response, what we're doing is we're asking questions, and we're putting on a curious detective hat to try and attune and use our intuition to what's actually happening in this moment. So, for example, if my daughter were to get up and she's like a sleepyhead, and then now it's like she has to get up and do all the rigmarole of the morning, I might say something like, wow, it must have been really hard to get up this morning. You're just so tired, and your bed is so warm and comfy. And in that place, it's like what I'm saying to my child is, I'm in the trenches with you. I feel your pain. I'm using my perspective. And I'm searching. Now, in that case, I get it right? But I'm searching for what is it that's their big need or their big suffering right now, so that I can attune to it. This is my right brain now, right? So my nonverbals, my eye contact, my touch, everything is aligned with curious connection and investigation to figure it out. And then I ask her, and now this might seem very counterintuitive, which most things in parenting are, because you think that it's going to encourage the behavior.
Yeah.
If I would say, oh, your bed feels so comfy and you don't want to get out of your bed, and then the child goes, no, I don't, and then pulls the sheet up over. But the funny thing is it might not be immediate, But the child now begins to relax. Their system begins to relax, meaning like, I'm not alone in this world. Somebody else knows my pain. I don't want to get out of bed. It's too warm and delightful in here. And then I relate to it. You know what? I didn't want to get out of my bed either. The covers were so warm. I'm using my imagination to try and figure out, what do I think is actually the issue?
Yes.
When I pinpointed it, and you might have to play around with a few things, and the child feels met in that space. So with your son, you might say, if he's not wanting the bread, you could even go with that. Like, you're almost doing an Aikido move, right? You're going with, today, I don't know, you can make a joke out of it and go, yeah, let's we don't want this bread. We're going to try this bread today. Or we could go with, we like to have choice in our life, don't we? Yeah, I like choices too. Or it could be, oh yeah, you don't feel like eating this bread today. You know what? Yesterday, I was really supposed to take my green shake, but I was like, nah, I don't want to do anything healthy today. I'm going straight to the muffin. Something that has the child, you'll have to put it in 3-year-old speak, right? But something that has the child feel like, not only do I get your pain and I'm attuning to it by all my cues, but I'm also using something in my life that I'm bringing up as a story and sharing that I'm just like you.
Yes,
we're different. We're together. You and I are the same. And then they feel safer. And then if ever you're going to be able to use the left brain to redirect, I feel it's there.
That's beautiful. Thank you. That's really helpful. So actually it reminds me of when I was in a better state, and then I kind of sat next to him and I was like, oh, you don't like this bread. Actually, yeah, you're right. Like, it has some bits in it that you don't like.
Yeah.
How about we try something different? So it's true. It's like just an awareness of being in that resourceful state, rather than like, oh, he's trying to manipulate me, or he's trying to do something that I don't want, just an extra effort. So it's a really good one. Thank you.
You're welcome. Right. So my tip number 2 is taking the perspective of your children, and really how well we're able to take perspectives really goes a long way into how attuned our children feel with us. So just so I can define what perspective taking is, when we think of sympathy, so imagine your friend has their dog just died. And sympathy is where you say, oh, I'm so sorry your dog died. Yeah, that's sympathy. Empathy is where you can see on your face, you're attuning. If they're frowning, you're frowning. And you might even tear up because you're so closely connected to your friend and you know how important this is. And you say, oh, I'm sorry your dog died. Perspective taking goes, I think, one level deeper than that. Perspective taking in MRIs highlight many different parts of the brain. So what you're asking now is where you go back into your archives to figure out, when was that moment in time where I had something die? Maybe it was my dog, maybe it was a hamster, maybe it was someone in my family. And in that place, you're literally climbing into that person's mind and thinking about, where do I have in my life some place that I can identify with what's going on exactly? Like, not necessarily a one-to-one, it's a dog, but something. And that place is where now you are internalizing the sensations and the pain, and it's a bit deeper because you're having to use like your working memory in order to retrieve this bits of information. So perspective taking is, I think, a really incredible and important skill for parents to develop. So how do we build perspective taking? Well, first of all, when some sort of interaction happens with your child and you feel bewildered or confused or frustrated, and your instant knee-jerk reaction is to get upset, then you go and you do your regulation, right? We know that, right? And then as soon as your higher thinking brain kicks in, you ask, what is it about me that would have created that result? What did I contribute to this? What is it about the way? Now, this is where we have to really take our ego and put it to the side, and be open to what we might be bringing to the table. Yeah, it's a real ninja move there, but a good one. And in that place, now we're open to exploring what's going on. So I'm going to give you this in real time with with my husband and I. So we spend a lot of time with our kids. And I make sure that, after they get picked up from school, we have a lot of one-on-one time. But when my husband comes, we feel like we have a lot of scarce time for just us to talk. And I'm sure a lot of, parents can relate to that. So I value that. And I know that our connection is very important to the entire family dynamic as a whole. So my son historically would so want to be around us that he would come and he'd play in our vicinity, or he'd want to just sit there. And I could feel this visceral response of, you need to go. You need to go. But I'm also recognizing that I don't want to hurt him. I don't want him to feel that he's not wanted. So all of this is happening very quickly in my head. A feeling of frustration at my son. And then I go into the story. Why can't he find something else? His sister can find something else for hours. Why does it need to be here? And I'm going on this whole big entanglement, and everything is about him, right? You. He doesn't know this yet. I haven't spoken yet. This is just what I'm noticing. So then I notice that I'm feeling very frustrated right now. And so, we've tried in the past to go with a left brain response, which is go find something else. And then once I begin to now recognize, okay, I might be bringing something to this situation. So what might this be? So I do some deep breaths. I'm still sitting there with my husband, and he's still sitting in the living room. And then I'm thinking to myself, and I kind of close my eyes for a moment, and I go, what is it about the fact that he's here that's annoying me so much? Yeah? And then I'm thinking, it's because there's a boundary here. Like, I want to have some one-on-one, really beautiful time, and you've had a lot of our time, and there's no boundary. So now it's still about him because he's not keeping the boundary, right? So I'm noticing it. Well, let me look back into my past now. Where is it that I'm struggling? Well, and then I start to realize I struggle with creating boundaries in my life. I'm so busy making sure everybody feels good and placating and making sure that I say it in just the right way. And I grew up in a house which was marvelous, and we talked about feelings and emotions, but there were no boundaries. I mean, we wrote on walls. My father was like, have free expression, write on the walls. Wow. So there was no boundaries. And so all of a sudden I realized that the issue is with me and my boundaries and my ability to powerfully articulate a boundary and know that I can still keep the love and still keep the connection and own what I want in that moment without going to a lot of song and dance. So once I realized that, I realized what I'm bringing to the table. So now I've released him of this responsibility that I'm putting on to look at, to handle it yourself and read my mind and read the energy. And so all of a sudden I soften. And then I say to him, and I can go to him and say, listen, Daddy and I are having some really magical time, just like when you and your friend are together. And I would love to have 10, 15 minutes. And then he got it. And there was no energy of, oh, Mommy doesn't want me, or Daddy doesn't want me here. And then he left. But I could say that where my voice didn't betray me. The tone of my voice was one of connection and love, and I could own that place. Now, that can only happen if I sit for a second and I think about what is it that I'm bringing to this space, yeah? So getting back to tip number 2 of perspective taking, this is where, for parents, you want to climb into the mind of your child and see things from their point of view, yeah? I remember once we had a nanny, and she was holding my daughter, and I took a picture of my nanny holding the daughter, and I'm looking at the picture, and I'm seeing my daughter squint, unaware as I'm taking the picture that there's a giant light above her that's causing her to squint. But I'm so caught up in my moment that I don't realize that what would have been like for her to be sitting there, possibly for 40 minutes, who knows, while she squints through a light. So this is where I'm constantly trying to climb to someone's mind, look around, and see what is the world like for you. For parents, you can help build this in your kids while they're young by you go to the park, and then your kids are playing, and they're maybe sitting next to you, and you see 1,000,001 interactions between a mom and a daughter about 2 kids playing, and you ask your children, what do you think why do you think he has that face? What do you think he's feeling right now? Why do you think that mother is angry? Now, here's the truth. When you play this game, which is a really fun game to play, and you can do it at a coffee shop or anywhere, you'll never know the truth. The kids will come up, and you can have fun just creating like tons of brainstorming of what it could be. And that actually is very powerful as well, because it teaches your child, don't be too tied to one truth. There's no one truth. You'll never know. When you're driving your car and somebody gives you a bad drive and you're thinking, what a jerk. But then I can change it and think, oh, he could be rushing to the house that's on fire, or his daughter's at the hospital, in which case you're thinking, go, cut everybody off, get to your daughter. all of a sudden you go from an energetic contraction to one of, so do I know the truth? Do I know whether he's a jerk, or do I know whether his house is on fire? I'll never know. So I'm going to choose the one that best services me. But the tip is, the better we are able to, one, reflect on our own inner minds by not only taking their perspective and climbing into somebody else's mind, but trying to think about, once we're calm, what am I bringing to the situation? Just ask yourself and sit with it and be prepared for whatever truth emerges. Because that brings me to tip number 3, which is how our ego kind of gets in the way of our parenting. Yeah. Which I can run with right now, if you like.
Yes, please. Well, just to quickly, so first tip was to, how do you make it like really tangible? Because I wrote down like, what is the way to calm down yourself? But if we were to like paraphrase it, if there is like a metaphor that you're using, what's your way to say?
The idea of climbing into somebody else's, like take a ladder and you're climbing into somebody else's mind. Yeah.
So that is tip number 2, the perspective taken.
So we were talking about, the first one was how to get our kids to listen and build rapport. We talked about regulation and the idea of co-regulation, so that we can, that's where we did the breathing, like counting from, let's say, 10 to 1.
Yep.
And we're working on ourselves.
Yep.
And whatever, again, when we say we're working on ourselves, we're also appealing to whatever we need to in order to calm down. And the third one is perspective. So, taking a ladder and climbing into somebody else's mind.
Got it. Super. Yeah, we're ready to rock on. You got 2 more tips to go.
So, being aware of how our ego plays out in our parenting. So ego being the image you have of yourself that gives yourself a sense of identity. Here's a very quick and easy way to know if you're an ego with your children. If you feel you're wanting to be right and you are in a power struggle, then you're in your ego. Yeah? Whenever you find yourself in judgment, oh, look at that person. She's got 17 items in the 16-item aisle, then we're in our ego, right? So we're identifying as something. It's like a beetle. You're like a beetle, and the ego is the hard shell that's separating you from the rest of the world. Yeah, I would do something different.
Yeah.
So how do we not be an ego, or in a, let's call it power struggle, in a power struggle with our kids? So I've established that generally it shows up in the parenting dynamic, with each one having a different point of view. One wants to be right. Now, I have a very, a way of doing, calming the situation down, because I find that with the kids, I can very quickly get out of my ego. And I say, you're right. It's the first thing I say. I might be upset and angry, and it might take me a few moments to get to the you're right. Yeah. But as soon as my higher thinking brain kicks in, that's what I say. Because I know there's no place to go now with you're right. Yeah? And then I get busy thinking about what is it about me that brought that situation, and I can always find something.
Yeah.
Right? So so the idea of that, yeah, you're right. There's something important that I was going to say about that, though.
And you're right is like a phrase where, you're giving them the permission to calm down, and they're right, because in their map of the world, that's what's happening.
Well, precisely. And then here's the thing. If I'm attached to a way of behaving or being or whatever it is, the moment that if ever I was going to have any impact in their life, it's in the teachable moment. It is not going to be where they're, with me. So now parenting becomes the act of footnoting. In fact, you become a master footnoter. How can I footnote this moment and find that really warmthy, loving, connected time where I can bring this up and go, hey, I noticed earlier on today you were really upset. What can we do? Let's think of some ideas. What can we do together, and collaboratively brainstorm on how to work through that, or give them some tools. But it's never going to happen when the child. And here's the thing: we are, as parents, whether we are constantly wooing our children. We are just like, in order to keep a relationship going, We still have to do nice things. We still have to try and understand each other and learn how to love each other in the ways we want to be loved. With our kids, it's constantly wooing. And the dynamic of where the ego has to be let go, it has to flow from the parent. We don't want that reversal to change. We don't want that to reverse. We want our children to learn that because we are emulating that continuously. Yeah? So I look at it as it's an opportunity for them to observe me taking the higher road and bringing peace to the situation. That does not mean that the behavior needs to continue necessarily. That doesn't mean that we're a yes for everything and we do mamsy-pamsy parenting. We can still create our boundaries. We can still be captain of the ship, but we can say our no with lovingly, right? Or so that's what I would recommend is observe your own mind and notice when you're wanting to be right. The minute you're wanting to be right, let it go, because find a way to let it go. And I'm just trying to think if there's any other what other techniques I use besides you're right. Oh, yeah. So the other way you can do this besides saying you're right is where once you notice you're wanting to be right, I call this the curious detective. I put on my curious detective hat, and I believe 100% that there's some perfectly valid reason, to your point, that's creating this behavior. So if my kid were to hit somebody, right, I could go into hitting's bad, we should never hit. I mean, he doesn't hit, but if it was, there's a perfectly sensible reason that made that child hit. And if I hold that mindset, then there's never going to be a sense of aggressive, tense, domineering, disciplinarian energy. It's going to be one of, oh, so what does a detective do? Detective doesn't put his any emotion into it. He's like, I want the facts. What's the facts, ma'am? And he's just as joyful asking for the facts because he is not connected to the yes or no of it. His energy is one of, hey, what did I miss? Tell me, what's going on for you? Oh, I can see you're really mad right now. Maybe I said, is there something that I said? Like, what was it? And then using your intuition and sitting with it and asking questions, which brings me to my last point, which we'll get to that in a second. That is how you can move your way through your ego and really use this chance as a trampoline for your own development.
Wow, this is wonderful. I love when you said parenting is like an act of footnoting, because footnoting is true. Like we put a mental note, okay, we need to look into that. This is where it's originating, but okay, maybe it's not the right time when we are in that tense zone, but taking time afterwards to look into and ability to take the higher road, to showcase, to lead by example, because that's how they learn, from this primary model. And joyful collection of facts, but being curious detector, that's brilliant. I love that.
And bearing in mind for parents, sometimes there is a feeling, like imagine your child at a play date and they're doing something and you're feeling like, I need to step in, and I'm worried about my image in front of this other parent, and they're going to think that I'm a good parent or a good disciplinarian or whatever it might be. And that's where the parent has to stand in their power and recognize, is embarrassing my child or ridiculing whatever it is that's going to happen, because you know in your heart the timing's not right and things aren't going to go the way. Can you stop the behavior? But instead of having the big lecture that the other parent sees you giving the big lecture, you can forego that need and want in service of the child, so that when later on, right before bed, when you're doing massages and loving time, then you can say, hey, how can we move through this? And then you feel really respected and collaborated with,
Yeah, that's ability to withhold, sustain, to create space when it's non-judgmental and finding the right moment to give feedback. It's a really big art, and I think a lot of us can learn from this reminder, how can we be curious detective during the day, and in the evening we can find the time and plan that, feedback session when we can actually share that back. That's great.
It's still difficult, believe me. I find that I can do it easier with the children than I can with my husband. I'll just say that.
Yeah. Isn't it fascinating that women find it harder to, it's like the romantic partnership is like the hardest. But, with children, I find like they trigger some of the points that go really deep into our heart. And men, I find, I don't know how about you, but for us in our family, for my partner, it's easier to regulate, to help them regulate than for me. Maybe it's because I'm so, connected to them, but for him, it's like, okay, well, I can do that. But in a romantic way, it's harder for him to regulate my reactions, and that's where this is where the work is happening. But it's true, the same principles would apply to a romantic relationship.
Sure. There's one other thing as well that's really important to be aware of when we're trying to do this with our children or even a romantic partner, I think. And that is, if we didn't grow up in an environment where anyone was asking us about our feelings, that was, really wanted to dig like an archaeologist to understand what's beneath it, that didn't take the higher road and open themselves up to whatever's emerging in this moment to try and understand it, it can be a real challenge because there's a part of their system, as I'm sure you know, that says, I didn't get this, therefore you're not going to get it. And it's not because any parent, this is all of us, yeah? This is not any parent drumming their fingers going, how do I thwart my child? Or how do I prevent them from having something? We know that. But this is why, nobody will trigger us the way our romantic partner and our kids will. No one will know how to push our buttons because it'll stimulate something really deep within us. And this, again, becomes our work, is how to become aware of our own mind so we can grow. And in growing, our children get to watch, observe, and emulate, right? Yeah. So that sometimes can be very difficult for a parent to give what they haven't got.
Yes, yeah.
So that's why exploring that would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we're number 5 and the final.
Yeah, the final one is really kind of amalgamates all of it, but I feel like it needs to have its own distinctive area, and that's to ask questions. I think the art of questioning, I've for a long time I've been thinking about creating a course on this, because to ask a question without judgment and without marginalizing one child over the other, and to notice when you have some deep energy around that question, it's an art form. Asking questions is an art form. And so practicing questions that you can ask your children so that you can untangle whatever's happening in their mind and their heart is key. And so that is what I feel is like one of the number one things that parents feel stuck on. They get stuck on, well, how do I say it? And what do I do? And if he says this, well, what do I say? And they almost want the script. If I could just have the script, he says that, then I say this. And so that's where I really believe that our divine intuition as women come in, and tapping into, once we've checked our ego and asked ourselves, what am I bringing to the situation? Think about what questions emerge. It's not necessarily an act of memorizing questions, but you can certainly practice what questions you can ask. So, for example, something as simple as your kids have gone away for the day and they've come back. A lot of parents might say, how was your day? And then the child goes, well, it's fine. Was it a good day? Yeah, it was good. And you don't get anything meaty, right? So here's a tip just with questions as an idea. When your kids come home, and this can burgeon out into all areas of questions, all areas of their life. But if they come home, we've been taught to ask open-ended questions. How was your day is an open-ended questions. But when you have a big, very exciting day full of lots of hoopla, to single their mind onto what happened that day is what we should be doing. So I would ask, hey, did the teacher get angry at anybody today? Was there any fights? Did you feel it left out at any moment today? Yeah, which is a yes or no, but leads to now a dialogue. So that's one. Practice close-ended questions to pinpoint their mind on a particular situation. Then when we get to open-ended, so if there's, let's say, a different scenario, two kids fighting or two kids not butting heads together, you can think about how you would structure those questions. So tell me a little bit about, obviously, how did you feel about that? Tell me, what was it about what he said that felt hurtful to you? What part of what part of that, yeah, right now I'm having a block here, but what part of that had you feel marginalized or sad? Yeah, I probably could give you a few better explanations or questions.
But that's very interesting. You said like the closed question, because normally in coaching for parents, it's the same question that in the coaching, it's all about open questions. But you're right. Whenever we ask, and this actually happened today, I was like, okay, did you go out today to play outside? And they both like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then they switched on, like their mind has started working, so they were ready to answer. And then you can add in the conversation, the questions that are more open, so they can start sharing more. But it's a very interesting insight what you're giving.
Yeah, you're converging their mind with center points, and then you're using diversion thinking to branch out, right? So yeah, but I would practice, and the way you practice is practice on everybody and all the time. Practice, just start writing down questions that you can ask your children. Start with close, and I think that once you practice it enough, you'll find that you're using the same type of questioning techniques on anything that gets thrown your way. So I would recommend, practicing that skill.
Definitely, practice makes perfect. Wow. So, as we're looking at these 5 tips for, they're true like ninja moves, as you said. How do we? And the first 3, it's all about our ego and getting out of our head, and then getting into the perspective of the child, getting into the body, so away from ourselves. And how do we use that body scan to calm us, the breathing, and then how do we establish these healthy boundaries, so our ego side and thinking what could I have brought to this situation to happen. So again, meta position, it's really kind of getting out of our head to wherever perspective possible, in a third perspective, meta perspective, body, to help the situation unfold in a more positive outcome, so that they feel also listened to and get to their level and pace it and go to that kind of empathetic level, as you said, rather than sympathetic. And then I love the act of footnoting and having that curious investigator hat, asking questions that can pinpoint and open them, rather than just a big question that they cannot swallow, but something that would open them up and get that again similar maybe level conversation starting, without us feeling like, okay, I need to be right, or them to be right. So kind of summary of what we've discussed is so much, and I'm sure we can rewatch and find more nuggets. But before we close, I wanted to ask you if there's anything that you would like to share, Rhea, and then where we can find more resources about you, and what's maybe coming, or what already is out there that people can find out about.
Yeah, thank you. So, for those of you listening, if you want to go to www.buildgreatminds.com, I have a video series that walks you through a series of very short videos that's for some of the biggest issues that tend to come up in parenting. And also once you sign in there, I'm always sending out podcasts and different articles on, the biggest pain points that seem to arise. So, and on top of that, if you want to reach out to me, I have written something called 99 Questions to Build Connection. And that really is, if you ever get stuck on what question is going to create heaps of dialogue and interesting conversations, this allows you to just kind of have a really great icebreaker. And then you can see whatever wondrous Alice in Wonderland rabbit holes you get to find with your children by asking these questions. So I'd love to send it out to you. Just reach out to me and I'll send it out.
That's wonderful. So it's www.buildgreatminds.com, or reach out to you through that website directly to ask for that 99 questions to build connection.
Yes.
Great. Rhea, it's been wonderful to have you. I've learned also today, so thank you. And I know that you've done some brilliant work for Mind Valley and Ninja Parenting course, and it's really wonderful to see how the world also is changing thanks to your efforts. So keep up the good work. Thank you for sharing your pearls of wisdom, and we'll speak to you soon, hopefully.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.